the definition of God. In the history of the National Basketball Association, there is one quote that gets repeated more than any other. It is a sentence that has been printed on t-shirts, painted on murals, and replayed in documentaries for 40 years. It was spoken by Larry Bird, a man who famously never complimented anyone, a man who treated his opponents with nothing but cold disdain. After a playoff game in April of 1986, Larry Bird sat in a locker room shaking his head, looking like he had just seen a ghost, and he said, "I think it's just God disguised as Michael Jordan." People love that quote. It feels poetic. It feels like the ultimate compliment. But when you actually peel back the layers of history, you realize that Larry Bird wasn't trying to be poetic. He wasn't trying to be nice. He was describing a trauma. He was describing a level of violence that didn't make sense to his brain. Because you have to understand who Larry Bird was in 1986. He wasn't just a star. He was the king. He was the MVP. His Boston Celtics were statistically the greatest basketball team ever assembled at that point in time. They were a machine designed to crush hopes. They went 40-1 at home. In an entire season, only one team managed to beat them in the Boston Garden. They were invincible. They were perfect. And then, on a Sunday afternoon, a 23-year-old kid walked into their building. A kid with a broken foot. A kid whose own management didn't want him playing. A kid who had spent the last 6 months sitting in the dark, watching his team lose on purpose. What happened over the next 3 hours wasn't a basketball game. It was an exorcism. It was the moment where the friendly image of Michael Jordan, the crying rookie, the dunk contest champion, the smile, died forever. And in its place, something else was born. Something darker. Something that didn't just want to win, but wanted to terrify. This is the story of the 63-point game. This is the story of the day Michael Jordan scared God. Chapter 1. The Broken Engine. To understand the miracle of 1986, you first have to understand the tragedy of 1985. We often look back at Jordan's career as a straight line to glory, but in his second season, it looked like it was already over. Coming off a Rookie of the Year campaign, Jordan was flying. He was the savior of Chicago. The city, which had ignored basketball for a decade, was suddenly electric. But in the third game of his second season against the Golden State Warriors, Jordan went up for a lob, landed awkwardly, and felt a snap. The diagnosis was a fractured navicular bone in his left foot. For a basketball player, specifically a player who relied on explosive verticality like Jordan, the navicular bone is a death sentence. It is notorious for healing slowly. It is notorious for re-breaking. In the 1980s, medicine wasn't what it is today. A broken navicular bone was the kind of thing that turned superstars into role players. The doctors told him he was done for. The year. The Bulls management, led by owner Jerry Reinsdorf and general manager Jerry Krause, told him to go home. They shut him down. For 64 games, Michael Jordan sat. And this is where the psychological torture began. You have to remember, Jordan isn't wired like a normal human being. Most players would take the year off, enjoy the salary, and rehab for next season. But Jordan is obsessed. While he was sitting, the Chicago Bulls were awful. They were losing night after night. And slowly, Jordan began to realize something that made his blood boil. The Bulls weren't just losing because they were bad. They were losing because they wanted to. It was the era of the lottery draft. The Bulls management realized that without Jordan, they had a shot at a high draft pick. They were incentivized to lose. They were tanking. For a man like Michael Jordan, whose entire existence is predicated on the concept of winning at all costs, watching his own organization try to lose games was like poison. He couldn't take it. He left Chicago, he went back to North Carolina, back to his college campus at UNC, and without telling the Bulls, without telling the doctors, he started playing. He started playing 1-on-1, then 3-on-3, then full 5-on-5 runs with the college team. He was testing the foot, he was pushing the bone to its limit. He wanted to see if it would break. It was reckless, it was dangerous, but he didn't care. He felt the bone hold up. He felt the explosion coming back. So he flew back to Chicago, marched into the front office and told them, "I'm playing." I want to pause the story here for just a second. What we are talking about right now, this refusal to accept reality, this obsession with pushing past what is safe, that is the core of this channel. We don't just recap games here. We study the mindset of the killers who built the NBA. If you are new here and you want deep dive documentaries that go further than the highlight reels, make sure you are subscribed. We are building the smartest, most intense basketball community on YouTube, and we want you in the inner circle. Click that button. Now let's get back to the office of Jerry Reinsdorf. Chapter 2. The 10%. The meeting between Michael Jordan and the Bulls ownership is one of the most famous confrontations in sports history. On one side, you had the doctors and the owners. They presented Jordan with the statistics. They told him that the bone was not 100% healed. They told him that if he played, there was a 10% chance he would refracture the foot and end his career permanently. Jerry Reinsdorf looked at Jordan and used an analogy. He said, "Michael, if you had a terrible headache and I gave you a bowl of 10 pills and told you that 9 of them would cure you, but 1 of them would kill you, would you take the pill?" It was a logical question. Any rational person would say no. You don't risk your life or your career on a 10% chance of death. But Michael Jordan looked him dead in the eye and said, "Depends on how fucking bad the headache is." That is the difference. To Jordan, not playing basketball was the headache. The pain of sitting out was worse than the fear of ending his career. The Bulls eventually caved, but they put him in a cage. They instituted a strict minutes restriction. Jordan was only allowed to play 7 minutes per half. That was it. 14 minutes a game. This created some of the most frustrating moments of his life. There was a game against the Indiana Pacers where Jordan came in, lit the court on fire, and brought the Bulls back into the game. With 31 seconds left, the Bulls were down by 1. It was a winnable game. Jordan was the best player on the floor. But his time was up. Jordan looked at his coach, Stan Albeck, and begged him. He pleaded with him to just leave him in for the final 30 seconds. Albeck looked at him, looked at the general manager in the stands, and shook his head. He said, "I can't, Michael. I'll get fired." They pulled him out. Jordan sat on the bench watching his team lose a game he knew he could have won. That moment broke something in him. He realized that nobody believed in him. The management was protecting an asset. They weren't trying to unleash a winner. He decided right then and there that he was going to drag this team into the playoffs, whether the management wanted him to or not. And he did. Despite the tanking, despite the minutes restriction, Jordan willed the Bulls into the 8th seed of the Eastern Conference. Their reward for this impossible effort: a first-round matchup against the Boston Celtics. Chapter 3. The Green Monster. If you grew up in the modern era, it is hard to explain just how terrifying the 1986 Boston Celtics were. Today, we talk about super teams like the KD Warriors or the Heatleys. The '86 Celtics were the original super team. They had 5 Hall of Famers on the roster. Up front, they had Larry Bird, the 3-time MVP who was arguably the smartest player to ever touch a basketball. Next to him was Kevin McHale, a Frankenstein of a player with endless arms and the best post moves in history. In the middle was Robert Parrish, the chief, a stoic defensive anchor. In the backcourt they had Dennis Johnson, a defensive pit bull. And coming off the bench they had Bill Walton, a former MVP who was playing the best basketball of his late career. They moved the ball like telepaths. They didn't just beat you, they dissected you. And playing them in the Boston Garden was a nightmare. The arena had no air conditioning. The parquet floor had dead spots where the ball wouldn't bounce, which only the Celtics knew about. The fans were ruthless. Their home record that season was 40 wins and 1 loss. The Chicago Bulls, on the other hand, were a disaster. The media called them Michael Jordan and the Jordan-heirs. The supporting cast was a mix of erratic players and guys who were rumored to be on drugs. Nobody gave them a chance. The betting lines were massive. Everyone predicted a sweep. Game 1 was played on April 17th. The Celtics won, 123-104. It was a blowout, but hidden inside that blowout was a warning signal. Michael Jordan, in his first real playoff game back from injury, scored 49 points against the best defense in the league. He was cutting through them. But because the Bulls lost by 19, nobody respected it. Larry Bird brushed it off. The media brushed it off. They said, yeah, Jordan got his points, but he can't beat a team like Boston alone. They poked the bear. And this is where the story gets good. Because the night before, Game 2, Michael Jordan did something that you would never see a modern athlete do. He didn't rest. He didn't watch film. He went golfing with the enemy. Chapter 4. The Golf Hustle. On Saturday, the day before the historic game, Michael Jordan called up Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge was the Celtics' shooting guard. He was tough, annoying, and hyper-competitive. Jordan and Ainge went out to a golf course in Boston. Now, Ainge was a good golfer. Jordan was just getting into the game. Ainge saw an opportunity. He started hustling Jordan. He was betting him on holes, talking trash, getting under his skin. By the end of the round, Ainge had beaten Jordan and taken a few $100s off him. But Ainge made a mistake. He didn't just take the money. He gloated. He talked trash to Jordan about the upcoming game. When they were dropping Ainge off at his house, Jordan looked at him. He didn't smile. He leaned out the car window and said, "Tell your boy DJ I got something for him tomorrow." DJ was Dennis Johnson, the man who would be guarding Jordan. Danny Ainge laughed it off. He thought it was just banter. He had no idea that he had just lit the fuse on a nuclear bomb. Chapter 5. The Day of Judgment. Sunday, April 20th, 1986. Game 2. The atmosphere in the Garden was relaxed. The Celtics players were joking around during warm-ups. They knew they were going to win. They were the champions in waiting, and the Bulls were just a speed bump on the road to the finals. The game tipped off, and almost immediately the energy shifted. Usually against a team as disciplined as Boston, you try to run a system. You try to move the ball, find the open man, and exploit mismatches. Michael Jordan didn't do any of that. He caught the ball, and he attacked. In the first quarter, it was a barrage. Pull-up jumpers, driving layups through 3 defenders. Jordan was moving at a speed that looked different from everyone else on the court. You have to remember, the 80s was a slower, more physical era. But Jordan was moving with 21st century athleticism. He scored 6 points quickly, then 10, then 12. Danny Ainge, the man who had hustled him on the golf course, was tasked with stopping him. Ainge was a tough, gritty defender. He was physical. But by the end of the first quarter, Ainge looked lost. He would be right in Jordan's face, hand up, perfect defense, and Jordan would just rise up, hang in the air for what seemed like 3 seconds, wait for Ainge to fall, and then flick the ball into the hoop. The Celtics coach, Casey Jones, started screaming for help. Double him, force him left. They started sending Dennis Johnson, one of the greatest defensive guards of all time, to help. It didn't matter. Jordan was splitting the double teams before they could even close the trap. By halftime, the Celtics were winning the game on the scoreboard, but the mood in the arena had changed. The crowd wasn't cheering as loud. They were murmuring. There was a sense of unease. Larry Bird was playing well, hitting his shots, keeping Boston ahead. But every time the Celtics tried to pull away and blow the game open, Jordan would come down and hit a dagger. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't smiling. If you watch the footage of this game, Jordan's face is completely stone. He looks like a predator. He looks possessed. We are heading into the second half now, where things go from great to impossible. But before we do, I need to remind you, we are growing this channel into the #1 destination for sports history. But we can't do it without the algorithm. The algorithm feeds on engagement. So if you are enjoying this breakdown, if you are feeling the intensity of 1986 right now, take 1 second. Scroll down. Hit the like button. Leave a comment saying, "No mercy." It helps us more than you know. Now, let's go to the fourth quarter. Chapter 6. The impossible climax. The fourth quarter of Game 2 is where the performance crossed the line from great to mythological. The Celtics were leading. They were executing their offense perfectly. Bird was finding McHale. McHale was scoring in the post. They were doing everything right. They should have won by 20. But Jordan wouldn't let them. With minutes left in regulation, the Bulls were down. Jordan took over completely. He stopped passing. He stopped running plays. It was pure isolation. There is a sequence where Jordan drives into the paint, and the Celtics collapse on him. Robert Parrish, 7'1", Kevin McHale, 6'10", and Bill Walton, 6'11", are all there. It is a forest of arms. Jordan jumps. He absorbs the contact, contorts his body in midair, switches hands, and spins the ball off the glass. Bucket, and the foul. The Boston Garden, which was usually a pit of vipers screaming at the opponent, went silent. They were witnessing something they couldn't explain. With time winding down, Jordan hit 2 free throws to tie the game at 116-116. The buzzer sounded. Overtime. In the first overtime, the war continued. It was a heavyweight fight. Larry Bird would score. Jordan would answer. Bird would score. Jordan would answer. It was a stalemate. Then came the second overtime. This is where the legend was cemented. At this point, Jordan had played almost every minute of the game. He should have been exhausted. He had just come off a broken foot a month ago. His conditioning shouldn't have been able to sustain this. But he wasn't slowing down. He was getting faster. The Celtics were tired. Their hands were on their knees. Jordan was chewing his gum, glaring at the rim, looking fresh. He crossed the 50-point mark, then 55, then 60. He broke the playoff scoring record of 61 points, previously held by Elgin Baylor. Then came the moment. Jordan had the ball at the top of the key. The entire Celtics defense was keyed in on him. He drove right. Kevin McHale, with his massive wingspan, stepped up to block the path. Jordan pulled up. He rose over McHale's outstretched hand. The shot was pure. 63 points in the Boston Garden against 5 Hall of Famers, with a team that didn't belong on the same court. It remains to this day the single greatest individual scoring performance in NBA playoff history. The prime mindset. Stop. I want you to really think about what you just heard. 63 points against the greatest team ever, on a broken foot. That isn't just skill. There are plenty of players with skill. That is a mindset. That is a refusal to accept the reality that is presented to you. It is a level of obsession that borders on insanity. That is what we call prime. Here at Take It Sportingly, we talk a lot about the no mercy mindset, but we wanted to create something physical that represents that standard. We have created the Prime No Mercy Limited Edition canvas. This isn't a poster. This is museum-grade art. We designed it to be a daily reminder on your wall. A reminder that dominance isn't given to you, it is taken. It is a reminder to attack your craft the way Jordan attacked the Celtics in '86. We have only produced 50 pieces for the entire world. Once they are sold out, they will never be reprinted. This is for the founding members of this channel. If you are watching this on your TV right now, grab your phone, pause the video, scan the QR code you see on the screen, go to the site, see if there are any left. Secure a piece of history before the edition closes forever. Do not wait. The mindset is everything. Now, back to the game. Chapter 7. The Meaning of a Loss. Here is the twist ending that makes this story perfect. Despite the 63 points, despite the miracle shots, despite the God performance, the Bulls lost. The Celtics, being the veteran machine they were, managed to grind out the win in double overtime, 135 to 131. They survived. They would go on to sweep the Bulls in Game 3, and then march on to win the NBA championship, cementing themselves as one of the greatest teams of all time. But in the aftermath of Game 2, the locker rooms told a different story. In the Celtics locker room, there was no celebration. They were quiet. They were shook. They knew they had barely escaped. They knew that if Jordan had just one other competent teammate, they would have lost. This is when Larry Bird gave the quote, "I didn't think anyone was capable of doing what Michael has done to us," he said. "He is the most exciting, awesome player in the game today. I think it's just God disguised as Michael Jordan." That quote traveled around the world. It anointed Jordan as the next king of the NBA. But in the Bulls locker room, Jordan wasn't celebrating his record. He was furious. He sat at his locker, head in his hands, disgusted. When reporters asked him about the 63 points, he snapped. He said, "I'd give back all the points if we could have won the game." And that is the key. That is the no mercy difference. Most players would be happy with the record. They would be happy with the praise from Larry Bird. Jordan didn't care about the praise. He wanted the blood. He wanted the win. That loss didn't break him. It educated him. He realized that being a one-man army wasn't enough. He realized that to beat a team like Boston, he couldn't just be a scorer. He had to be a leader. He had to build a defense. He had to terrorize his own teammates until they were as tough as he was. It would take him 5 long years to finally climb the mountain and win his first ring. But the journey started. On April 20th, 1986, that was the day the league stopped looking at him as a promising rookie and started looking at him as a force of nature. It was the day the NBA realized that the throne was no longer safe. The next chapter. Michael Jordan had proved he could outscore anyone. But the league still had doubts. They said he was selfish. They said he wasn't a winner. So Jordan decided to get meaner. In the next episode of the Prime series, we are going to tell you a story about psychology. We are going to tell you the story of the time a rival player made the mistake of trash-talking Jordan. And Jordan responded by literally inventing a lie about him, just so he could destroy his career the next night. It is a story about the dark arts of mental warfare, and you do not want to miss it. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your last chance. Click the button. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next drop. This is Prime No Mercy.